Mom chose me. You were never family, you were an outside investor. My brother said that from a Milan hotel bar on FaceTime, champagne shaking in his hand. 2 hours earlier, I had learned that 3 months of planning between my mother and her high school best friend, now the branch manager of my credit union, had ended in one morning. My signature forged, my savings emptied, and every dollar I had set aside for grad school wired out of my account. $198,000, 8 years of tutoring, 2 nail tech chairs. Every Saturday I gave up. Every party I skipped. She chose the morning of March 2nd, while I was in New York for my Johns Hopkins interview, then sent Bryce the money so he could film himself in Milan, captioning it, "Europe to Heal." My mother shrugged and said, "You got one scholarship, just get another one." I didn't cry. I walked out to the parking lot. I made one call. If this is already sitting like a stone in your chest, please hit like and subscribe. That's how stories like mine find the women who need them. Drop your city and local time below so I know where you're listening from. I'm Lindsay Fairbrook, 22, and this is the story of 2 weeks. From a call I made in a parking lot to my mother collapsing in her own living room. Rewind. March 4th, 2026. The Greyhound leaving New York on March 4th smelled like burnt coffee and old rubber. I had a window seat. My laptop bag was on my knees. 2 days earlier, I had finished the Johns Hopkins interview I had been preparing for since I was 16. I had spent 2 cheap nights in a hostel near Penn Station because the return ticket I could afford did not leave until Wednesday. I opened the credit union app to make sure I still had the $195 I needed to submit my application before the March 15th deadline. Ridgemont Credit Union. Personal savings. Balance, $0. I closed the app, opened it again. $0. I killed the app entirely, reinstalled it, signed in with my full password. Not Face ID. $0. I sat for a long time with a paper Dunkin' cup going cold in my other hand. The man next to me was snoring. A baby cried 3 rows back. The driver announced Trenton in 90 seconds. I didn't move. I pulled up my transaction history. March 2nd, 8:14 a.m. In-branch withdrawal, $66,000. March 2nd, 8:19 a.m. In-branch withdrawal, $66,000. March 2nd, 8:24 a.m. In-branch withdrawal, $66,000. Signed for by L. Fairbrook. I had not been in Pennsylvania on March 2nd. I had been in a borrowed hotel conference room in Manhattan, answering questions by video for a Johns Hopkins admissions panel about maternal mortality data in rural counties. Someone had signed my name 3 times in a small credit union branch in the town where I grew up. I already knew who. I let myself into my mother's house at 5:47 that afternoon. Denise was at the counter unloading a bag of Wegmans clementines. She was wearing the pink sweater my aunt had given her at Christmas. She never wore anything my aunt bought, except when she wanted to look soft. "How'd it go, honey?" she said, without turning around. I set my phone face up on the kitchen island, the transaction history still open. "Mom," she glanced at the screen, then back at the clementines. "Oh, yeah, I meant to tell you." "Meant to tell me what?" "Bryce needed to get out of here for a while. His nerves. You know how he gets." You took $198,000 out of my account. I moved it, sweetie. It's just moving. You forged my signature. She sighed like I'd asked her a boring homework question. Lindsay, you are so dramatic. Sharon helped me. She knows the family. You got one scholarship, just get another one. You're the smart one. There was a small chime from the counter. My phone was ringing. Bryce, FaceTime. Incoming. I answered without picking it up. He was in a hotel bar. Amber wallpaper, a pianist in the background. A champagne coupe in his left hand angled toward the camera. Chris, he said. Bryce called me Chris when he was drunk, short for Christmas, because I'd been born on the 23rd. Chris, listen, Mom chose me. You were never family. You were an outside investor. He laughed. My mother laughed with him. I didn't touch the phone. I took my jacket off the hook by the door. Bryce was still laughing when the storm door hissed shut behind me. My father was sitting in the truck in the driveway, with the engine off. I don't know how long he'd been there. He didn't roll the window down. He looked at me through the glass the way he'd looked at me since I was 6. Like I was a bill he wasn't sure he'd paid yet. I walked past his truck, got in my Corolla, started the engine so I'd have heat. There is a Wawa on Route 30, 1 mile from my mother's house, that I've gone to at midnight since I was 15. It has one flickering fluorescent light over the far pumps. I parked under it. I opened my contacts, scrolled past my mother, scrolled past my brother, stopped on the name Viv Lark. I hit call. Before I tell you what Viv said, you need to understand who she is and who I was before she picked up. My mother is Denise Fairbrook, 49. She runs a small florist on Maple Street called Petal and Post, mostly funeral wreaths and homecoming corsages. Everyone in Ridgemont knows her, and everyone thinks she is the warmest woman in Pennsylvania. She learned to be warm the same year she learned to lie about money. She was 14. My father is Grant Fairbrook, 52. He services elevators. He speaks 3 sentences per meal. When he was 30, he decided that the easier life was the one where he didn't disagree with his wife, and he has not disagreed with her since. My brother is Bryce, 19. He dropped out of Ridgemont Community College for the 2nd time in December. Hio is what my mother has been calling, since the day he was born, the surprise gift, meaning I was the one they'd already planned to have, and he was the one they wanted. I have been the older sister, the practice run, the one who set the table. I have been the small square of shade my brother stood in his whole life. I did not know, until March 4th, that I had also been an investment account with a name on it my mother never intended to honor. I have one photograph of my 8th birthday. It is on my aunt's Facebook, buried under years of Easter posts. In it, I am alone, in the kitchen. There is a Duncan Hines yellow cake on the counter with one white candle and my name spelled with an extra letter. Everyone else is in the backyard around a card table, taking a picture of Bryce holding the Xbox 360 my grandmother had bought, with the $4,000 envelope she had given my mother for me. The envelope said in her handwriting, "For Lindsay's future." She said, "Cash goes to the little one. Save it for the big one." My mother put the envelope in her purse at the table. By morning, Bryce had the console, and the envelope was gone. My aunt, Elise's mother, still alive that year, leaned down at the party and whispered, "Sweetheart, write down the amount." She'll deny it later. I wrote 4,000 on the back of a Post-it and put it in the pocket of my party dress. That Post-it is still in a box of childhood things in my closet. My aunt died the next spring. My mother spoke at the funeral. She said, "Sisters are for keeping each other honest." Every adult in the room nodded. I ate the cake by myself. I remember the crumb feeling like paper on my tongue. I remember thinking very calmly, "We are not the same." Then I forgot I had thought it. I forgot it for 14 years. There is another photo. Christmas 2013. I was 10. My mother arranged everyone for the Christmas card picture on the front porch. She put Bryce in the middle. She put my father on one side. She put herself on the other. She turned to me. I was already standing on the top step behind them, in my green dress. And she said, "Honey, you take it, you have the steadiest hands." I took the picture. I'm not in it. She sent it to 62 people that year in a red envelope with cursive on the back. My grandmother on my father's side called that January and asked gently, "Where is Lindsay in the card?" My mother laughed and said, "She's shy about the camera." I was standing 3 feet away when she said it. My father said one sentence at dinner when I was 12 that I still hear in my sleep. Bryce had shoved a pea into his ear, and my mother was laughing, and my father, chewing, turned to me and said, "Girls in this house just get married, honey. Grad school's for the ones who can't." I said, "I want to study why babies die in poor counties." My mother put her fork down. "Baby, you can't even fix the toilet float. You're going to save babies?" Bryce laughed with the pea still in his ear. I have thought about that dinner every time I have paid my own utility bill. I was 15 in 2018. The first time I made money that felt like it belonged to me. I walked into Mai's Nails on East Main Street on a Tuesday after school and asked Mai whether I could sit at the pedicure station and practice fills until I was fast enough to charge. Mai looked at my hands for 4 seconds and said, "You come Saturday. I pay cash." Mai was 61 that year. She had a small crescent scar under her left eye. She never asked why a 15-year-old wanted cash work. I think she knew, the way women who have worked with their hands for 40 years know. My third Saturday, she pushed a $100 bill across the counter and said, "You keep this at home?" "Yes, ma'am." Home is not a bank. Home is a woman you're related to. Find a bank. That fall, I started tutoring SAT math at $30 an hour. By senior year, I had nail clients on me's rotation, tutoring clients after school, and a system. Cash went into the trunk of the Corolla my grandmother had left me, the one thing my mother could not touch because it was titled to me. Saturdays were my mother's grocery day. She rarely noticed I was gone. I made $220 my first month at Mai's and hid it in a shoebox under my mattress. Taped shut. 6 weeks in, my mother cleaned my room. The shoebox was empty when I got home. On top of the tape she had written in blue Sharpie, "You owe me 15 years." I did not cry that night either. The next weekend, I bought a small fireproof safe with a lockbox at Home Depot and kept it in the Corolla. Every dollar I earned from then on went there first. I learned early that saving money was not only about earning it. It was about keeping it out of reach. I was 17 the first time I watched my mother test the exact plan she would eventually run on me. My cousin Elise came to our house the week her mother died. Elise was 22. Her mother was my father's little sister, the sister my mother had bled dry for 20 years without any of us knowing. Elise sat at our kitchen table crying, and my mother pulled her chair close and put her hand on Elise's wrist and said, in the softest voice, "Sweetheart, do you have any of your own money? Just a little I could borrow?" 12,000. 1 week. Elise stopped crying. She stared at my mother. Then she stood up, walked out to the porch, and called her father, my uncle, who was already driving up from Philly to bring her home. He drove 90 miles per hour. He was in our driveway in an hour and 40 minutes. He didn't come inside. He waited by his truck until Elise walked out with her overnight bag, and then he backed out of the driveway so fast the mailbox shook. I watched all of it from the second floor window. I wrote Elise's number down in a spiral notebook. It stayed in my sock drawer for 6 years. That night, my mother told me, "Don't mention Elise's name in this house again. Some people can't handle grief." I said, "Okay, Mom." I meant, I know exactly what you just tried to do. I turned 18 in the spring of 2021 and started at UMBC on a full tuition scholarship in public health. I lived at home and drove the Corolla to campus before sunrise, then back after dark. For 4 years, I worked whichever shifts fit around class: SAT tutoring, weekend catering at a private club outside Owings Mills, and nail clients whenever Mai had an open chair. The week I opened my UMBC email account, my mother came home with a laminated brochure from Ridgemont Credit Union. "Sharon runs the branch. Honey," she said, "she'll take care of you. Family discount." Sharon Kettering had been in my mother's yearbook. Class of 95. My mother's arm around Sharon's waist. I opened the account because I wanted a place my mother could not reach, with a shoebox or a cleaning excuse. It was in my name, my login, my social security number. At 18, that felt like a wall. I did not know that Denise and Sharon had begun talking about my savings before I noticed either of them watching it. I only knew my mother became interested whenever I mentioned a new tutoring client or an extra catering shift. The account was supposed to be the end of hiding money in a car trunk. It was the place she learned to wait. Vivian Lark walked into my intro to biostatistics class in the fall of 2021. She was 20, a year ahead of me after taking a semester off to work, and she sat beside me, because mine was the only empty chair left. Halfway through the first lecture, she noticed I was signing the attendance sheet. "Your handwriting changes when you're stressed," she whispered. "Keep examples of it, real ones." I laughed. I thought she was joking. 2 weeks later, at the campus Starbucks, she asked me to sign my name 3 ways on a napkin. She photographed it, then handed me the napkin back. "Save things like this," she said. "Texts about money, screenshots, dates. Don't argue with people who rewrite what happened. Keep the version that doesn't depend on them admitting it." I did what she said because Viv had a way of making practical advice sound like a weather report. I asked her once why she was so specific. It was spring of my sophomore year. We were splitting a frozen pizza in her studio apartment, and she told me that her mother had drained her grandmother's Social Security checks for years. Viv had found the mail at 16, helped her grandmother report it, and learned very young that a family story could sound harmless until you laid the numbers beside it. Then she took another piece of pizza and said, "So, save your receipts." Viv was also the one who told me to screenshot every text my mother ever sent about money. Every "just borrowing," every "we'll pay you back," every "you have so much for a girl your age." I built a folder on my laptop called Bridges because I wanted a name that reminded me not to burn one before I knew I had to. By senior year, it had 2,300 entries, messages, payment confirmations, photos of cash tips, tutoring calendars, and notes I had written after conversations I did not trust myself to remember correctly. Viv never promised she could save me from my mother. She taught me something smaller and more useful. Never let someone who benefits from your confusion become the only historian of your life. I hit my savings target of $198,000 on December 11th, 2025. I did not tell my parents. I did not celebrate with anyone. I bought myself a coffee at the Wawa on Route 30 and drank it in the Corolla. The parking lot was empty. It was 2 degrees above freezing. The heater only worked if I punched the vent housing, so I punched it. I watched the credit union app tick from 6 p.m. to 6:01, then said one sentence to the windshield. "You made it." My own voice sounded like a stranger's. That same month, though I would not learn the details until everything was over, my mother met Bryce and Sharon Kettering at a bar called The Locust, 3 streets from our house. Bryce had just dropped out of community college again. Sharon was carrying problems of her own. My mother knew exactly how to speak to people who needed rescuing. She told them Bryce needed a fresh start. She told Sharon I had too much money for a girl my age. By the end of that winter, the 3 of them had agreed on the same lie, that what I had earned was family money, and that I would be smart enough to replace it. I did not know any of this while I sat there with my coffee. You do, because I'm telling you now. That is the last thing you needed to know before I picked up my phone in the Wawa parking lot on March 4th, 2026, and called Vivian Lark. "Hello," Viv answered on the second ring. "Say it," she said. I told her in 90 seconds. Balance 0. $366,000 withdrawals. My mother's face in the kitchen. Bryce in Milan with champagne. "Just get another scholarship." Viv did not say anything for 4 seconds. Then she said, "Drive to Baltimore tonight. My couch. 9 tomorrow morning. I'm taking you to Corinne Lawson. She does civil fraud work, and she knows how to make people preserve things before they disappear." I said, "For me?" Viv said, "For you. And for every woman who is taught to call theft a family misunderstanding." I said, "Viv." She said, "Bring your laptop. Bring Bridges. Bring every text, screenshot, bank statement, and note you have. Do not call your mother again tonight." I looked through the windshield at the Wawa light shaking on the hood of my car. Then Viv said, "Do you still have Elisa's number?" I said, "Yes." "Bring that too," she said. "We are not going to decide what this is before we know how long she has been doing it." Before we hung up, Viv added, "And Lindsay?" "Yeah. Change your passwords from a device your mother has never touched. Then drive." I did. I started the car and merged onto I-83 South toward Baltimore. There was only Bridges on my own laptop, the folder I had built because Viv taught me that people who lied about money usually lied twice. At a rest stop outside York, I changed every password I could think of: email, banking, school portals, the cloud drive where I kept tutoring calendars and screenshots of my mother's messages. Then I pulled up my transaction history again. March 2nd, 8:14 a.m. March 2nd, 8:19 a.m. March 2nd, 8:24 a.m. 3 withdrawals, 3 versions of my name. I took screenshots. I emailed them to Viv. I emailed them to myself at an address my mother did not know. Then I drove. The sky over York was black, and the salt trucks were out on the shoulder. I drove 70 the whole way. I did not cry. I hummed one song from my grandmother's funeral because it was the only music that fit the shape of my chest. Somewhere around Shrewsbury, I realized my hands were not shaking. They should have been. They were not. I passed a simi and a state trooper. Neither one looked at me twice. I have thought about that drive a lot since, about the small, cold gift of being invisible to strangers on a highway. On the exact night you become a person, your family will never be able to see the same way again. I got to Viv's building at 1:34 a.m. She opened the door in flannel pants and a Grant Thornton hoodie. "Coffee's on," she said. "Tomorrow starts now." I put my keys in the small ceramic bowl by her door. I took my shoes off. I sat down on the floor next to her radiator because I did not trust myself to sit on furniture. Viv sat on the floor with me. She did not touch me. She did not say, "I'm sorry." She said, "Open bridges." We spent 2 hours sorting what I already had. My mother's texts about borrowing, my tutoring payment confirmations, photos of cash tips, a note I had written after the night she took the shoebox from my room, the 4,000 post-it from my 8th birthday, scanned years earlier because I was afraid the paper would fade. None of it proved who had walked into the credit union on March 2nd. It proved something else. I had spent my life being told I was dramatic whenever I tried to name a pattern. At 3:51 a.m., Viv closed the laptop. "You do not have to prove your whole childhood tomorrow," she said. "You have to protect what happened this week. The rest will either matter or it won't." I lay down on her couch with my clothes on. I did not sleep much. At 8:40, Viv put a coffee in my hand and said, "Corinne's at 9. Corinne Lesson was 5'2" and wore a suit the color of wet concrete. Her Baltimore office had 2 chairs, a coffee mug that said, "Due process," and a stack of unopened mail balanced against the wall. She read my screenshots, the withdrawal history, and the texts and bridges, without touching her coffee. When she looked up, she said, "First, I'm sorry this happened. Second, we slow down." I stared at her. "Not because you are wrong," she said, "because people who take money count on the person they hurt panicking first." Viv leaned forward. "What does she do?" Corinne turned the screen toward us. "We preserve what can disappear, the March 2nd camera footage, the withdrawal records, the wire trail, any internal notes showing who approved what. We make formal reports, and we ask that the money not move again while the facts are reviewed. Can I get it back? I cannot promise that today, but the account was yours. The withdrawals were not authorized by you. Those are facts we can build from." I said, "My mother did it." I believe you, Corinne said. Belief is not proof. Let's get proof that does not need anyone in your family to be honest. She pointed at the 3 signatures. Do you have examples of your real signature? Viv said, several years' worth. Good, preserve them. Do not compare them yourself. Then Corinne asked the question that changed the shape of the room. Has your mother ever tried to take money from anyone else? I thought of Elise at our kitchen table in 2020, my aunt barely in the ground, my mother's hand on her wrist. I have her number. Corinne picked up her pen. Call her, she said. Ask whether she is willing to tell me what she remembers. Do not tell her what to say. I stepped into the hallway with my phone already in my hand. I stepped into the hallway. I dialed the number I'd written down when I was 17. I hadn't dialed it once in 6 years. Elise picked up on the 4th ring. Her voice was cautious. This is Elise. I said, Elise? This is Lindsay, Grant's daughter. I'm sorry for the way I'm calling. She did it. She did it to me. 2 days ago, 200,000. Forged my signature, sent it to Bryce in Italy. Elise was quiet for 8 seconds. Then she said, I'm looking at ways right now. I can be in Baltimore in 90 minutes. She hung up. I stood in the hallway of a stranger's law office holding my dead phone, and I felt for the first time in 22 years that there was another person in the world who understood the exact math of being disposable. Elise walked into Corinne's office at 2:47 p.m. that same day. She was wearing hospital scrubs under a Barber jacket she had thrown on in the parking lot of St. Christopher's Children's Hospital, where she had been mid-shift when I called. She had not stopped for gas. She had not stopped to change. She had signed out to the nurse manager with one sentence, family emergency back tomorrow, and driven the 97 miles from Philadelphia to Corinne's Baltimore office in 1 hour and 38 minutes. Her badge was still clipped to her scrub pocket. The badge said Elise R. Fairbrook, RN, Pediatric Emergency. She was carrying a manila folder softened at the edges. She said, My dad kept these in a fireproof safe for 6 years. He said, quote, Denise will try this again. And when she does, you take these to whoever asks. Corinne opened the folder. Inside was a handwritten loan request my mother had drafted for Elise in 2020, unsigned. A text message. Elise, don't embarrass your mother's memory. She loved me. She would want this. And a post-it note in my uncle's handwriting. If Denise ever contacts our niece Lindsay, this is her defense. I read the post-it 3 times. My uncle, the one who has never spoken more than 80 words to me at any Thanksgiving in 20 years, had been protecting me since I was 16. I turned my face toward the wall of Corinne's office because I did not want 3 women in a room to see me start to shake. At 6:14 that evening, the 3 of us, me, Viv, Elise, sat in the corner booth at a Perkins diner on the west side of Baltimore. The waitress brought coffee we would not drink. Viv had a legal pad. Elise sat across from me and stirred her sugar packet slowly and did not look up. Finally, Elise said, I was 22 when she did it to me. I was in scrubs. My mom was cold in the ground for 3 days. Your mother put her hand on my wrist. I thought she was comforting me. She was measuring my pulse for whether I'd say yes. I said, "I'm sorry I never called you." Elise looked up. "You were 17. You couldn't have called." I said, "I wrote your number down that night." Her eyes filled. She said, "You knew." I said, "I knew." We did not say anything for maybe 2 full minutes. Viv cleared her throat. She said, "We have 12 days until it's clean. I'd like to use them." Elise wiped her nose on a napkin and picked up Viv's pen. "Tell me what I sign." Viv drew the next 12 days on the back of a Perkins placemat. March 6th through 8th. Corinne would ask the credit union to preserve the March 2nd camera footage and records. Viv would archive Bryce's Milan posts. I would pull statements, tutoring calendars, and payment records showing where the $198,000 came from. March 9th through 11th. Elise would give Corinne a recorded account of 2020, and her father would send what he had kept after he warned Denise away from her. Corinne would compare dates, messages, and signatures. No one would call my mother. No one would warn Sharon. March 12th through 14th. We would follow the money as far as the records allowed and decide what belonged in a police report, a civil claim, or a file we needed preserved. March 15th. I would submit my Johns Hopkins application with the $195 Viv lent me. March 16th. We would let my mother keep believing I had calmed down. March 17th. Corinne would file what was ready. The next day, people would be notified. Viv looked up. This is not a movie. We do not choose every consequence. We choose the facts we can prove. Then she asked, "Your father, are you including him?" "No," I said. "He did not take the money. He let things happen. I'm not going to turn silence into a crime just because it hurt me." Elise squeezed my hand once. Then Viv said, "Good, go home tomorrow. Let them think the storm passed. If your family ever whispered that you weren't really one of them, drop the age you first heard it in the comments. I want you to see how many of us were taught to make ourselves smaller to stay." I drove back to Ridgemont that same night. My mother had made a pot roast. Bryce was still in Milan. My father was on the porch with a Bud Light. My mother handed me a plate the second I walked in the door and said, "Hi, honey. Feel better?" I said, "I feel better, Mom." She smiled. "See, you always spiral and then you come around. You just needed to sleep on it. You'll get the scholarship. You always do. Now eat." I sat down at the table. I ate the pot roast. I asked her about the florist. She talked for 11 minutes about a wedding order for Easter. My father grunted twice. My phone buzzed under the table. A text from Viv. "Subpoena filed 8:03 a.m. tomorrow." I put another forkful in my mouth. I said, "Mom, Viv is helping me sort out the deadline. I'm sorry I overreacted." Denise put her hand over mine. She said, "You're such a good girl. You always figure it out." She meant you always let me get away with it. I said, "Yes, Mom." Bryce's story loaded on my phone at that moment. A red Ferrari in front of a hotel in Como. Caption, "Big Sis paid for all of this." I did not look at my phone at the table. That night, I lay in my childhood bed and listened to my mother tell my father through the wall that the storm has passed. I did not sleep, not because I was upset, because I was counting. But before dawn on March 7th, I drove back to Baltimore. Viv was waiting outside her building with 2 Dunkin' coffees, and the expression she wore when she had already decided not to let me fall apart in public. At 7:46, Corinne called. "The credit union has preserved the March 2nd footage," she said. "They have confirmed the withdrawal slips, and wire records are still in their files. I have not seen everything yet, but I want Lindsay here when we review what matters." Viv and I drove to her office in silence. I had spent the last 2 days terrified of seeing proof, and then terrified there would be none. The first clip was time-stamped 8:14 a.m. My mother walked into Ridgemont Credit Union wearing sunglasses. Sharon came out from the back hallway, gave her a small wave, and led her into the office. The camera had no sound. It did not need any. A few minutes later, Sharon laid 3 withdrawal slips on the desk. My mother wrote my name once, then again, then once more. Sharon watched. Sharon did not stop her. The wire confirmations came next. 3 transfers, all made that morning. The money did not go straight to Bryce's personal account. It moved through an account he controlled for a travel service he had used before. Corinne wrote that down, then told us not to guess what it meant until the records were complete. I watched the clip twice. The first time, I felt cold. The second time, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief, not revenge. It was the feeling of finally putting one solid object on a table after years of being told I was describing smoke. Corinne paused the screen on my mother's hand around the pen. "This proves she was there," she said. "It shows Sharon was there. It supports your account of what happened. We will let the records tell the rest." Viv leaned toward me. "Save it 3 ways?" Corinne gave her a look that was almost a smile. "Already handled." Over the next few days, the evidence became less dramatic and more useful. Corinne asked the credit union to preserve the account activity and branch records connected to March 2nd. She asked for internal notes around the withdrawals and wire instructions. Viv sat beside me while I downloaded 4 years of statements, tutoring invoices, catering deposits, nail client payment logs, and every record that showed the money had come from me. There were no magic documents. There were spreadsheets, dates, small deposits from women named Mrs. Kelly and Ms. Mendez, Venmo notes from tutoring parents, cash deposits I had photographed, because I never trusted myself to remember which Saturday had paid for what. The money arrived in pieces: tutoring, nails, catering, scholarship refunds. 4 years of dates that proved I had built it myself. Viv kept gathering Bryce's Milan posts. She saved each story with a date and time visible. The Ferrari, the hotel bar, the boat, the caption thanking Mama. The posts were not proof by themselves. They showed that while I was being told to find another scholarship, someone was spending as though my future had become a vacation. On March 10th, Corinne said the records showed repeated balance checks before the withdrawals. She would not name anyone until she could confirm every log. I did not ask. For the next 4 days, I did the only thing I could do. I let Bryce keep filming himself. I let my mother believe I was ashamed. I let Sharon believe a frightened girl had been too overwhelmed to call anyone who knew what to ask for. Bryce posted 47 stories in 10 days. Ferrari, Como, the Duomo at night, a nightclub in Ibiza, a private boat off Portofino, Every fifth story tagged Petal and Post with a champagne emoji or a heart. Viv saved them all. That is a lot of evidence that somebody thought this money was a celebration, she said. I watched another story load. Bryce grinning beside a rooftop pool, the skyline behind him. Let him, I said. On March 15th, I sat at Viv's kitchen table and submitted my Johns Hopkins MPH application. Application fee, $195, lent by Viv. The confirmation email arrived at 11:17 a.m. We have received your application. I read it twice, then put both hands over my face. Viv did not say anything. She poured me a glass of orange juice. At 6 that evening, my father called. Lindsay. Dad, Sharon talked to your mother. She says the credit union has been asking questions about March 2nd. Do you know anything about that? I looked at Viv across the table. Dad, I'm finishing a paper. I don't know anything about Mom's friend's job. He was quiet, then he said, Come home Monday. Your mother wants dinner. And Wednesday she's having people over. Bryce was supposed to be back by then. She says he needs a proper welcome. Of course, I said. I wouldn't miss it. After I hung up, I texted Viv. He's suspicious. She wrote back, he's scared. That night, Bryce posted from a Milan airport hotel lobby. His caption said, Hotel front desk won't take my card, LOL send help. Earlier that afternoon, Corinne had told me the credit union was reviewing the March 2nd wires. The travel card Bryce had been using no longer cleared. 2 hours later, the story disappeared. My father called again but did not leave a message. I understood what my mother would do next. She would not cancel the party. She would make the room bigger, the food nicer, and the story prettier, until it looked like Bryce's trip had always been something the family had chosen. I did not need him in the room for the truth to arrive first. Monday, March 16th. Dinner at my mother's house. My mother made meatloaf and mashed potatoes and green beans with slivered almonds. The meal she used to make on the nights my brother made honor roll in 4th grade. She wore lipstick. She had put a small blue tea light on the table. I sat down. I put my napkin on my lap. I noticed the tea light was one of hers from Petal and Post, the kind she'd been trying to move for 2 winters, the ones the church had stopped ordering after the smell of the wax made 3 ladies at Coffee Hour dizzy. She'd lit one for me. She would not have lit one for my brother. She lit them for people she was managing. I ate. I chewed slowly. My father watched me across the table. My mother said, So, Lindsay, did we learn a lesson about leaving too much cash in one account? I said, Yes, Mom, I learned a lot. She laughed. She said, Good. See, Grant? She always comes around. My mother reached over and cut a bigger square of meatloaf and slid it onto my plate. She said, You've been so skinny lately. Eat. Grad school makes you skinny. You have to eat. She was making me a plate for the first time since I was 12. My father saw it. He did not react. My mother said softly, I'm proud of you, honey. You know that. She meant, please don't say anything else. I said, Thanks, Mom. I meant, I know exactly what you are doing, and it is not going to work. My father did not laugh. He kept looking at me. He said, Lindsay, come outside with me. I want to smoke. My father has not smoked in 19 years. I put my napkin down. I stood up. I followed him out onto the porch. He closed the storm door behind us. He did not light anything. He turned to me under the porch light. He said, "Lindsay, what are you doing?" I looked at him for a long time. I could see for the first time in 22 years that he was afraid of me. It wasn't a warm feeling. It was a small feeling. It was the size of a coin. I said, "I'm missing you, Dad." He blinked twice. He said, "That's a strange thing to say when I'm right here." I said, "It is." He looked past me at the yard. He said, "Your mother, she doesn't always know what she's doing." He was 52 years old and he was trying, for the first time in my life, to be a father in real time. He was also 30 years too late. He said, "Whatever this is, honey, come to me first. Not the other way." I understood then what he was actually asking for. He was asking me to give him a chance to stop it. He wanted to be told so he could beg me to spare her. So he could keep the version of his marriage where he still didn't have to disagree with her out loud. I let him wait for an answer for 8 full seconds. I said, "Okay, Dad." I meant no. I opened the storm door. I went back inside. I finished my green beans. Later, upstairs, I wrote in my journal for 3 pages. I wrote, "My father is afraid I have grown up. He is afraid I have done what he was too tired to do. He will not stop me. He may even, at the end, be relieved." I wrote, "I will not save him." "Corinne has everything ready," she said. "She files first thing tomorrow. Service is set for Wednesday afternoon." I said, "At the party?" "At the party." Outside my bedroom window, my mother was still talking about Bryce's welcome home cake. I said, "Good." Viv paused. "Get some sleep." I did not laugh, but my mouth moved. March 17th, 2026, was the day Corinne stopped telling me what might happen and started telling me what had been done. That morning, she filed the civil claim to recover the $198,000 and sent the evidence we had gathered to the local police, the credit union, and the state office that oversaw Sharon's work. The bank records, preserved camera footage, withdrawal slips, wire trail, Elise's statement, and screenshots from Milan went out in separate packets. Corinne did not call them victories. "They are facts," she said. "Now other people have to answer for them." By noon, there were case numbers, confirmation emails, and instructions not to contact Denise or Sharon. The process server had our address. The officers who would come the next day had enough information to know why they were there. At 1:20 that afternoon, after I signed the last pages in Corinne's Baltimore office, I drove back to Ridgemont. My mother had already strung silver streamers across the living room. A welcome home Bryce banner was taped over the mantel. She was pulling a Costco tray of pigs in a blanket out of the oven as though a party could make the last 2 weeks look normal. She saw me drop the oven mitt and hugged me hard. "Sweetheart, tomorrow is going to be so good. Everyone's coming, Mrs. Belknap, Uncle Ronnie, the Halls, even Delia from your dad's work. I want you to help me frost the cake tonight." I said, "Of course, Mom. Just tell me what time." She looked toward the refrigerator, where her phone was charging. "The party's at 3. Bryce is having travel trouble in Milan, but he'll be home as soon as it gets sorted out. We are still celebrating. He needs to know his family is behind him." I said, "What time do you want me there?" 4, she said. Be here at 4 sharp. There is something at the college you have to do first, right? Her face flickered. She was going to argue. I saw it. Then she decided it was not worth it. She thought I had returned to my old role, the reasonable daughter, the one who made room for the story everyone else preferred. 4 sharp, honey, she said. I promise. I hugged her back for the last time in my life. She smelled like flower and lavender oil. I closed my eyes. I did not cry. I let go. March 18th, 2026. By 3:12 p.m., my mother's house was full. 22 people, streamers, cider, a punch bowl, Mrs. Belknap in her turquoise cardigan, Uncle Ronnie in his Steelers hat, the halls from 3 doors down, Delia from my father's shop, the pastor from the Methodist church we had not attended in 6 years. Bryce was not there. His name was everywhere instead. On the banner, on the cake, on the framed photo my mother had placed beside the punch bowl. Bryce, in sunglasses, somewhere in Italy, one arm raised around a champagne bottle. At 3:24, Denise's phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. She looked at it, turned the screen face down, and smiled too quickly. His flight is delayed, she told the room, but he knows we're all here for him. Mrs. Belknap said, Of course he does. My mother stood in the center of the living room with a serving spoon in her hand. She looked at the banner, then at me. See? She said. See what a family looks like? At 4:46 p.m., the doorbell rang. My mother smiled. That will be Ronnie's wife. She's always late. She opened the door. 2 Ridgemont police officers and a process server stood on the porch. The process server said, Denise Marie Fairbrook. My mother said, yes. He handed her 4 sealed envelopes. She looked down at the top one first. Her face did the thing I had watched at funerals. The small crack at the corner of the mouth when someone understands the room has changed and no amount of talking will put it back. The process server explained that one packet was the civil claim for the money taken from my account. Another contained the report and supporting evidence turned over for review. A third notified Denise that the credit union records connected to March 2nd had been preserved. The fourth named Sharon and stated that a complaint about her conduct had been sent to the state office that supervised credit union employees. He did not turn the room into a courtroom. He did not read statutes or predict sentences. He said Denise would have time to speak with counsel and that she was not to destroy documents or contact witnesses about what had happened. The room went completely quiet. 22 people stood in my mother's living room holding paper cups of cider. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I could hear the Halloween decoration ceramic ghost my mother refused to take down clicking, faintly, on the mantel every time the furnace blew air. I could hear the small, wet sound of a woman named Mrs. Belknap in a turquoise cardigan, setting her cider carefully on top of a doily. My mother said, This is a mistake, honey. This is my daughter's money. My daughter asked me to move it. The officer said, Ma'am, there's an exhibit attached. Would you like us to review the exhibits with you now, or would you prefer counsel? My mother turned to me. She turned very slowly. Her lipstick was still perfect. Her hair was still perfect. Her eyes had gone flat in a way I had only seen twice before in my life. Once when my aunt died, and once when the church newsletter forgot to list her name under the arrangements committee. She said, "Lindsay, tell them. Tell them Mom asked you and you said yes." Every head in the room turned toward me. I looked at her. I did not blink. I said, "Mom, you forged my signature on 3 withdrawal slips on March 2nd at 8:14 in the morning. Sharon watched you do it. There is video, there is audio, there is a pattern. Please stop asking me to lie for you." She flinched like I had slapped her. Viv, who had come in through the garage 20 minutes earlier and been silently sitting in the reading chair by the mantel, said, "I can help with the exhibits, sir." Everyone turned. Viv stood up. She was holding a small remote for the living room TV. My father had bought that TV 3 Christmases ago. It was the biggest one on the block. The TV came on. The first exhibit was the branch security camera from March 2nd, time stamped 8:14 a.m. My mother in sunglasses. Sharon behind the desk. 3 withdrawal slips. My mother signing my name. Someone in the back of the room, I think it was Mrs. Belknap, gasped and put a hand over her mouth. My mother said, No, I was helping, I was moving." The second exhibit was audio. It was my kitchen. It was 2 nights ago. My mother's voice, clear and warm and unmistakable, filled the room through the surround sound speakers my father had installed the summer Bryce turned 13. "You got 1 scholarship, just get another." Bryce laughing from Milan. My mother laughing with him. The laughter lasted 11 seconds. Every person in the room listened to 11 seconds of my mother laughing with my brother about the college fund she had stolen from me 2 days earlier. Uncle Ronnie looked at the floor. Mrs. Belknap's daughter, she was maybe 17, standing by the piano, put her hand over her mouth. The third exhibit was Bryce's Instagram. 47 stories. Ferrari. Como. Portofino. Thank you, Mama. Viv had put them in order, dates still visible in the corner. The Ferrari. The rooftop bar. The nightclub in Ibiza. The private boat. The champagne bottle. Thank you, Mama. Then a black slide. Then the wire amount. $198,000. Bryce was not sitting on the couch. He was still in Milan, his travel cards no longer working, calling from a number my mother had stopped answering. His last story had gone up that morning. A photo of an airport carpet captioned, "Mom, call me." No one in the room needed him physically present to understand what the money had bought. The fourth exhibit was a scanned page in my Uncle Marcus's handwriting. "If Denise ever contacts our niece Lindsay, this is her defense." Under it, in a photograph, the 2020 handwritten loan request my mother had drafted for Elise at our kitchen table the week my aunt was buried. The same table my mother was leaning against right now. The room was silent for maybe 12 seconds. The pastor from the Methodist church put his cider down on the mantel very carefully, as if a loud noise would break something. Uncle Ronnie said one time, softly, "Oh, Denise." Mrs. Belknap started to cry. My father sank into the velvet armchair by the window. He did not look at my mother. He did not look at me. He looked at his shoes. Mrs. Belknap's husband, a man named Wallace, who had known my mother since before I was born, walked slowly across the room and picked up his wife's coat from the back of the sofa. He said in a voice made small by disbelief, We're going to go. Denise, I'm sorry, honey." He said it the way you say it to a woman standing in an empty house on the morning her husband's funeral has ended and she has finally understood she is alone. The doorbell rang again. My mother, still holding the 4 envelopes, turned toward it like a small animal. Sharon Kettering was on the porch in her Ridgemont Credit Union polo shirt. Denise had called her that morning and asked her to bring a cake. She was holding a store-bought cake box. The second officer stepped out onto the porch and said, "Ms. Kettering?" Sharon said, "Yes." He said, "Ma'am, I need to speak with you. Please set down the cake." She set down the cake. Denise stood in the middle of her own living room with 4 sealed envelopes in her hands, but she did not read any of the titles again. The process server had already explained enough. A claim for my money, records being preserved, a complaint about Sharon's conduct, instructions not to contact people connected to what had happened. My mother opened the first packet anyway. Her mouth moved without sound. "Lindsay," she said. It was not an argument. It was the first time in my life she had said my name, as though it belonged to a person instead of a problem. Her knees folded. She went down onto the hardwood floor and the envelopes slid from her hands like white leaves. Mrs. Belknap knelt beside her. Uncle Ronnie stepped back. My father did not move. Then Denise's phone started ringing again. She stared at the screen. Bryce. For a moment, nobody moved. Then she answered by accident. "Mom?" Bryce's voice came thinly through the speaker. "They said I can't use the card." "Mom, what is happening?" My mother looked at the papers. She did not respond. The officer looked at me across the room. He said, "Ma'am, we'll take it from here. Do you need anything?" I said, "No, thank you, officer." I put down the cupcake I had been holding for the last 38 minutes. I placed it very neatly on the coffee table, on a napkin I had folded into a triangle. I took my jacket off the back of the reading chair. Uncle Ronnie stood up as I passed. He put his Steelers hat over his chest. He said, "Sweetheart, I should have said something to your dad 20 years ago. I'm sorry." I did not know how to answer him, so I did not. I nodded once. He nodded back. That was enough. My father was still in the velvet armchair. He was staring at the exhibits still frozen on the TV. The last frame was the amount, $198,000, in white numbers on a black slide. He raised his eyes to mine as I walked past. He opened his mouth, he closed it, he opened it again. He said, in the smallest voice I have ever heard him use, "Lindsay, wait." I did not wait. Viv followed me to the door. I did not look back at my mother. I did not look at the phone still glowing in her hand. I did not look at my father. I walked out of my mother's house at 4:58 p.m. on March 18th, 2026. I did not close the door softly. I did not close it hard. I just closed it. The silver streamers Denise had tied between the lampposts blew sideways in the March wind. Viv unlocked her Subaru with a small click. She held the passenger door open. "Where do you want to go?" she asked. "Anywhere that isn't this street," I said. She backed out of the driveway. I did not look at the house in the side mirror. I already knew what it looked like from the outside. I had spent 22 years standing on the wrong side of the door. If you're watching this, and someone in your family is telling you we're all you have, I hope tonight you take one honest look at your bank statements. That is where they'll show you what you actually mean to them. That is the only love letter they will ever write you that they can't take back. By March 20th, Bryce was back in the United States. The cards tied to the stolen money had stopped working in Milan. The hotel wanted payment, and the version of Europe he had filmed for 10 days collapsed into phone calls, airline desks, and a flight home he did not want to take. I did not meet him at JFK. I did not speak to him. The legal process did not become neat just because the party had ended. There were interviews, documents, bank records, and weeks when Corinne told me there was nothing useful to do except wait. But the evidence was clear enough that by the end of April, the outcomes were set. Denise accepted 3 years of supervised probation, full restitution of the $198,000, and a $40,000 tax penalty. Sharon accepted 2 years of supervised probation and lost the banking credential she had used to help my mother. Bryce agreed to return the $150,000 that could still be recovered and complete 500 hours of community service. I did not attend every hearing. Corinne went when I did not need to be there. Elise sat beside me when I did. My father filed for legal separation in April. I learned about it from Uncle Marcus, not from him. Grant did not call. He did not ask for forgiveness. I had spent most of my life waiting for him to say one brave thing to the right person. By then, I understood that waiting had been its own form of childhood. On March 23rd, 5 days after the party, an email from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health arrived while I was at Viv's kitchen table. I read the word admitted 3 times before it became a sentence. Later that afternoon, another message came through. The Rangel Fellowship had selected me. Full tuition, a living stipend. The chance to keep studying the work I had wanted to do before anyone in my family decided my future was spare money. Viv cried before I did. Elise put both hands over her mouth. I sat there with the email open and thought about the Wawa parking lot, the $0 on my screen, and my mother saying I could just get another scholarship. I did get one. Not because she was right about me, because she had never understood what I could build when I stopped asking her permission to keep it. By June, the house in Ridgemont was being prepared for sale to cover what Denise could not pay. I did not go back to watch boxes leave the rooms where I had grown up. I had no reason to. Instead, I signed a lease on a small apartment in Baltimore for the summer. Viv helped me carry in 2 lamps and a box of books. Elise brought pizza and the framed photograph of her mother, the aunt whose warning had waited 6 years to become useful. She set it on the counter and said, "This is your side of the family." I believed her. I changed my phone number before classes began. I blocked my mother, my father, and Bryce. I did not do it because I needed them to suffer. I did it because I was finished making a life around the possibility that they might finally see me. The 4,000 Post-it from my 8th birthday is still in a box in my closet. The date is faded. The number is not. For years, I kept it because I was afraid no one would believe me. Now I keep it because I do. Family is not blood. It is who shows up when your account hits 0.